Okay, ready to jump into another deep dive with me. Today, we're going to be looking at a career path you might not expect. Hand packers.
Interesting.
Yeah, we're going deep and we're using insights from RoleCatcher. It's a career development platform, and hopefully by the end of this, you'll know if this could be a good fit for you.
Sounds good.
So when I see hand packer, I think of like someone packing boxes, but I have a feeling it's probably not that simple.
It's funny you should say that. It's easy to kind of just look at that title and think that that's all it is.
Right.
But like a lot of jobs these days, it's often a lot more than meets the eye.
That's what makes this deep dive so interesting.
hmm
So let's jump into it. What does RoleCatcher's career guide say hand packers actually do all day?
Okay, so they emphasize, the guide does, a need for precision and speed.
Okay.
So hand packers are collecting the right goods, inspecting them to make sure there aren't any problems, then carefully packing them so they don't get damaged, and then they got to label everything accurately too.
Oh, so there are a lot of details to keep track of that.
Yeah, attention to detail is super important.
But what about automation? How is like all the technology they're putting into these warehouses and stuff, how is that changing this role?
That's a great question. It's a really important thing to think about because even though these tasks sound really hands-on, the way people are doing them is changing really fast because of technology.
Uh-huh.
So RoleCatcher actually points out that robotics, AI, it's getting more and more common in warehouses and distribution centers.
Wow. So it's not just about how fast you can pack a box anymore.
Right, it's so much more than just having good manual dexterity. Like if you're an aspiring hand packer, you got to be adaptable. You got to be willing to learn new technology.
I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah, and it's only going to get more important as things progress. Imagine having to troubleshoot a robotic arm or something,
Oh, wow.
or understanding the data from one of those packing efficiency programs.
That's a very different picture of what a hand packer does every day than I had before we started.
Yeah,
So being comfortable with technology is just as important as being able to pack quickly.
exactly.
Okay, so we have an idea of the tasks. It's more technical than I thought. But what's it really like to be a hand packer?
Yeah.
What's the day-to-day really like?
Well, let's look at what RoleCatcher has to say about the good and the bad of this line of work. Like any other job, there's going to be pros and cons.
Okay, so let's get into it. So RoleCatcher, they list some pros and cons, which I always appreciate. It's good to have a balanced perspective.
Yeah, you don't want to sugarcoat it.
Right, so one of the pros is that you don't necessarily need any formal education to get an entry-level hand packer job.
Right. And that's huge for people who maybe like learn better hands-on or they're making a career change. It makes it a lot easier to get started.
Totally. But I do wonder about like the earning potential if you don't necessarily need a degree.
That's really important to think about, yeah. I mean, getting your foot in the door is great, but where do you want to go next? Long-term career goals, how does this job fit into that, both in terms of money, but also, just generally?
And speaking of, RoleCatcher mentioned flexible work schedules as a possible perk.
Right.
So how common is that, really? Like, is that standard or is that something like a nice thing to have if you can find it?
Yeah, you don't want to assume that any perk is going to be standard.
Right.
It really depends. Some places might have flexibility, others are going to have like shift work, maybe evenings and weekends, depending on what they're packing and shipping.
I hadn't even thought about that.
It's really about what works for you. Do your needs and priorities match up with the reality of the work?
Yeah, finding that right fit is so important. So we've got this job that's physical. You have to have an eye for detail, be ready to adapt, and it seems like more and more you got to be comfortable with technology. So with all that, do you think that, our listener could really see themselves doing this kind of work and being happy, thriving even?
I mean, that's what we're trying to figure out, right?
Yeah.
And one way to think about it is, what are the skills you'd learn doing this that you could use in other jobs? Even if you don't see yourself as a hand packer forever, the things you pick up could be super useful later on.
And actually, RoleCatcher, they profile like an entry-level hand packer in the guide. And it's really interesting because this person they talked about, they started out in that role, and then through that, they're now looking at supervisory positions.
Yeah, see, and that's a perfect example of how a job like this can be like a stepping stone.
Right.
Like maybe you actually love working with your hands and how fast-paced everything is, but down the line you want something more, maybe more responsibility, maybe you want to be a leader.
Exactly. It's not always about landing that like dream job right away.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes it's about finding a job where you can build up skills, build a foundation.
And that's what's cool about this, it could lead to a supervisory role in a warehouse or even something totally different like logistics or supply chain management.
So many options. Okay, but before we move on, I got to ask about something because I was looking at the RoleCatcher guide, and they have this additional skills section,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them are really specific, like pack leather, pack soap, pack stone products. I mean, is there some kind of special training for that?
Yeah, they do get really specific, it's true.
Right.
But it just goes to show you always have to be learning no matter what you do.
That's true.
Like, yeah, those sound like super niche skills, but in a world that's getting more and more automated, that kind of specialized knowledge, that could give you a real edge.
So even though you might not need a formal qualification to get started, if you really want to stand out, it's those unique skills that will do it.
Exactly, because it shows that you're adaptable, you're willing to put in the work to learn the ins and outs of your job, no matter how small the detail might seem.
Yeah, like the more specialized you are, the better your chances of staying ahead of all this automation stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's not just the technical stuff either.
Right.
RoleCatcher talks about this too. It's physically demanding being a hand packer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure.
And I don't just mean lifting heavy boxes, although that's part of it, but you need stamina to keep going all day.
Right. You have to be on your feet, moving fast, and still not messing up. Like, you can't lose focus.
It's a lot. You need endurance, you got to have an eye for detail, and you got to be able to work quickly, but, well, under pressure. It's not for everyone.
That's true, yeah.
And that's okay. It's all about knowing yourself, what you're good at, what you like, before you jump into any career.
I like that. Knowing yourself is really important. Okay, so we've talked about what hand packers do every day, what a career path could look like, and how technology is changing things. So what does it all mean for our listener?
Well, if you're listening and you're someone who likes working with your hands, you like things fast-paced, and you really get satisfaction from a job well done.
Like when you can actually see what you accomplished at the end of the day.
Right, exactly. This could be something to think about.
Especially if you're okay with the physical part of it and you're good with tech too.
Exactly. And don't forget, even if you don't see yourself doing this forever, there are other jobs you could do with the experience you get. It's not a dead end.
Like a stepping stone, right?
Exactly.
You could become a supervisor, you could move into logistics or supply chain management, or even use your special skills to do something totally unique.
Lots of possibilities if you're willing to work for it.
That's what we like to hear. So if you're feeling stuck, maybe you need a change. Or if we've piqued your interest and you want to learn more about hand packing, maybe give it a try. Why not? You never know until you explore your options. And if you want to go even deeper, check out RoleCatcher. They've got all kinds of resources on their website, career guides, interview tips, the whole deal. You can find them online at RoleCatcher.com. Until next time, keep those career goals high, and remember, your dream job could be just a deep dive away.